All right, here we go. Virtual book tour number 3. And we've got an excellent episode coming through with a big focus on gratitude, which is a recurring theme in something that I've discovered probably about 8 years ago. And whenever I see people working in this space, it's always a great prompt to start a conversation, including the co-host for this series of virtual book tours. But I'll just explain a little bit of context. What do productive accidents mean? You can think of it as serendipity. You can think of it as happenstance. You can think of it as some sort of happy coincidence. And what I sort of discovered is the more that you play with this concept, the more predictable and repeatable it becomes. And I'm sure that by the end of this episode, we're going to discover some more collaboration opportunities between us, and that's something like a personal challenge that I play with in every conversation. And I'm looking forward to seeing what happens on the other side of this series of book tours. So, without going on for too long, let's jump into the main body of tonight's show, or this morning, wherever you're located. For me, it's evening in Hong Kong here, but I know we've got the rest of the people here that have written books located in the US, so it's morning their time. Chris, if you want to open it up, thank you.
Hey, Peter, thanks a lot, man. Appreciate you bringing in and for co-creating this space with me, and your brilliant idea to bring in authors. And then, me thinking, hey, I've read these guys' books. They're grateful people. Let's get them in a room. Let's have a conversation and let's have fun and share their books. So let's bring the other 3 guys up right now, and then we'll one by one allow them to share their books. So we got Stephen Safer here. Welcome, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So Stephen's coming from Savannah, Georgia, and then we've got Scott Colby here.
Hey, good morning, Chris. Good evening, Peter.
Thank you, Scott. Good to see you.
Yes, and are you in Knoxville, Tennessee?
Knoxville, yep.
Right.
3.5 hours from you, man.
That's right. I know. I keep seeing all your tours, and I hope we have a chance. I want to talk about your hiking stuff because I needed to book one, and my wife and I need to do a day trip to come see you, for sure. And now we got Austen here. Austin's in Seattle, Washington. How you doing, buddy?
Good morning, everybody, and evening, Peter. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good to see you guys. It looks like you're on the road, Stephen.
Yeah, I'm actually in a parking lot.
Totally good.
I'm off the road.
I get it. I believe you.
Yeah, so, he's got a family, so he didn't want to wake up his wife, and he's got some people watching the kids. So this is he's got a serenity, quiet space, which is awesome. Correct. And a good internet signal.
100%.
All right. So maybe what we'll do is we will go around in a loop, and we'll just spend a few minutes sort of giving a high-level overview. And then we'll come back and go deeper into each of your books. So, Stephen, maybe just explain a little bit about your story and where you're based, and just a high-level introduction to your book would be great. And we'll come back and give you more time.
Excellent. So I'm Stephen Safer. I am based out of Savannah, Georgia, and this is pretty much where I was born and raised, or grew up over here in Savannah. And basically, my story in brief is. Was a bit of a troubled teen, had my ups and downs throughout middle school and high school. Ultimately ended up spending about 13 years in heavy metal, punk and metal bands, punk rock bands. And then through that process, went kind of on a spiritual odyssey and eventually came back to my roots as an Orthodox Jew, and then began writing more spiritually geared, if you will, kind of lyrics, poetic nuances. And that's kind of what Universal, and my first book, The Infinity Frequency, is basically essays, colorful essays that are kind of laced with spirituality, psychology, philosophy. And these books really are aimed at promoting personal growth, faith, and positivity. And that's kind of the... And
are you still passionate about punk rock, or is that out the window?
I still have respect for it, and I still enjoy it from time to time. But for me, it was a nice place to live, to visit. But I needed to continue to grow, expand, and I didn't want to get stuck in one particular area, genre, or station in life. So I didn't put any limits, and I'm just continuing to try to move forward and grow.
Just as a placeholder, and we'll come back maybe and talk about it either today or another time, but I'm part of a group called Punks and Pinstripes, and it's a mixture of creatives and people that do more traditional sort of careers, and we host an event every 2 weeks, and we get some people to speak about it. I think you'd be a pretty interesting guest on that show one day. So
excellent.
That'll be a follow-up.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
All right. So let's pass over to Scott. Let's hear more about your story and your book.
Sure. Hey, Peter. Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me. My name is Scott Colby. I am based out of Knoxville, Tennessee. Kind of my story that I'll just share briefly right now, and I'll go in deeper when we circle back, is my gratitude story began in Guatemala in 2014. I took a very impactful trip there to build schools with kids for a community that didn't have much. And kind of what I learned there was the power of gratitude, with really focusing on and being grateful with what you do have, even if it's very little. And I saw a need to instill more gratitude in my life, but also to help businesses use gratitude to build relationships instead of focusing on just the transaction, focus on the people. So I wrote a book called The Grateful Entrepreneur, and it's 40 strategies on how to use gratitude to cultivate relationships so a business can make more money.
Excellent. I love it. Austen.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Hey, everybody. So I just recently finished my book, Gratitude, a Work in Progress, and it really is about two kind of core things. The first is I spent a year doing gratitude, writing a thank you note a day. And so the book is in part just a reflection of that process. And then two, throughout that process and through a lot of interviews and research, I found a framework that I think makes gratitude more accessible for people to do projects around gratitude and be able to deliver it more consistently throughout the project, no matter what type of project it is. So
how long have you been doing these notes about gratitude?
Yeah, so I did them consistently from January 26, 2020 to January 26, 2021. Wow. And now I just have thank you notes on my desk, and whenever the spirit or whatever it is hits me, I write a thank you note, but I'm less consistent now. But I'm always thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, I have a similar, I guess, entry into discovering gratitude, and it's actually someone that we hosted on a different podcast series with Chris Mush Panjwani, a guy was working here in Hong Kong. He's from Pakistan. He's actually moved back to Pakistan, but he gave an evening presentation at General Assembly, which is kind of like I guess a night school for startups. You know, I think it was in New York based, and someone brought it out here, and he gave a talk about the essence of an entrepreneur. And he sort of, the context was, so let's say you lose your job from a big corporate setting, and you're suddenly doing your own thing, and you don't have all the infrastructure around you. How do you stay focused and motivated to perform? And one of the key ingredients was gratitude and perspective, and the fact that if you've got fresh running water wherever you are, then you're already better off than 80% of the people on the planet, something like that. Just focus on the simple things. And the next day I was on a flight to Australia, and I had my notebook, and I was just writing lists of things, and I was going, okay, what could I do with all of these ideas that are floating around? I was following Seth Godin at the same time, and I just read Malcolm Gladwell, and he talked about 10,000 hours. Seth Godin's always saying, just ship your work. And I'm going, well, I'm not going to write about, I work in finance, I'm not going to write about that. I think it'd be kind of boring. But maybe I could connect the dots and write about, gratitude, and maybe I could do 10,000 thank yous, and etc. And like you, I haven't done it every day, but if you do one a day, 10,000 turns into 27 years. So, if you're serious about it, then that's what kind of happens. And I'm up to 1,400 out of 10,000. And the more you write, the more you pay attention, the more alert you are to good things happening in any situation. And so I think that's what connects all of us. That's why I got interested in another gratitude project by Chris Palmore, which is Gratitude and Pasta. That's how I met Chris when he's doing Gratitude Space, and that's how we're all here today. So,
oh, that's great to hear. And Peter, I saw Scott nodding too about the entrepreneur, and when we're talking about gratitude, I feel like it really puts us in a place of humility in a lot of ways, and really appreciate what others bring to the table. And the best entrepreneurs that I've seen are really good about recognizing their strengths and other strengths and pulling that out of people. And so, so I've been taking a couple notes based on what you're saying, Peter. I'll have to get some more names from you. That was great.
So,
Chris, do you want to talk about your story in your book too?
For sure. Thanks. It was great hearing all y'all here. You know, my story is started back in 2013, where I was listening to a podcast, and the podcaster Adam Carolla was basically talking about how, you know, celebrating birthdays were like appreciation trophies, and because that idea kind of resonated with me, when my birthday was coming up, he put a nugget of an idea in my head, which was he didn't celebrate his birthday. What he would do is he was saying either make it an achievement, so celebrate an achievement on your day, or basically make your birthday about something else other than the fact you were just born. So, you know, my birthday was coming up, so I decided that with that thought in my head that I was going to write my mom essentially what was a gratitude letter. And I got up and I wrote her that letter. I put it on Facebook because I wanted it to be public and I wanted to surprise her. And, you know, I didn't know that what that was going to do. I just felt like I wanted to do it, and it ended up being a monumental moment in our relationship, where, you know, for 35 years, my mom very close up to that moment where I actually wrote something and made her speechless, where she couldn't even talk to me. And that's what solidified how powerful to me, just being grateful for somebody in your life, what that can do. You know, I tell people, it's like, you know, it's not magic to write a letter of gratitude. It's not magic to send a voicemail, or there's no magic in it, but the scenario it can create is completely magical. So, you know, I didn't know at the time my mom's cancer was going to come back, and 4 months to the day later, she passed away in hospice care. But, you know, from that experience, you know, I wrote a letter to my dad my following birthday, and it had a very resonating experience. And I decided that I had a little nugget of an idea. What if I could create space for other people to have this experience? And because this isn't a podcast about Chris's story, because I'm going to stop there and just say that us doing this right now, you know, Dear Gratitude that came out last year, and then the book I'm going to share about Dear 2020, these are all space creating books for people to come into their own gratitude. So I'm excited to be sharing more about that later. Thank you.
It's excellent. No, really, now, you know, I've got so many hooks that I could go back and dig deeper into, but I guess, you know, we've got a certain amount of time. I really want to understand how you guys all got to meet each other too, because I'm often as interested in how these connections happen as what happens, because if you understand how they happen, then it becomes probably more repeatable. And so I'm looking forward to continuing these conversations. But for now, let's go back to Stephen and go a bit deeper into your book. And one of the questions that I have on this series is, you know, did you ever think you were going to be an author? You know, and what was your journey towards writing your book? Were you self-published? Did you go through a traditional route? How long did it take? And if someone was going to start writing a book, what tips would you have for them as well?
All right, thank you, Peter. So I was always interested in writing, even in school. I enjoyed English and creative writing. I wasn't sure that was going to manifest and materialize into actually putting together books, but I always had a proclivity towards writing, and I enjoyed reading and creativity in that capacity. Also, I enjoyed poetry and coloring with words, and I always appreciated people that had were able to articulate and kind of paint with their words. So that was already kind of in me during my, I guess, early high school years. As far as writing, both the Infinity Frequency and my latest book, Universal, if you can kind of get that there. These were collections of essays written over the last decade for my shul, my synagogue. So each of these essays were not. This was not a sequential writing where I sat down and had in mind that I was going to actually be putting together a book. This is something that ultimately just began to kind of amalgamate over the years. And I looked back in my files, and I was like, I had like 80 some odd essays. And at that point, I began to just comb through them, fine tune some of them, and put them together in a book form. So this was not written in one fell swoop. This was not an idea that I had many years ago. This was kind of an idea that just came upon me, and then already having the 10 years worth of material, I just began to kind of stack it in order to put out these two books. So there was no real intention there. As far as your question about putting together a book, I guess, putting together a book is in a more metaphorical way is kind of like a birth process. You have to, it has to gestate for a while, right? And there's the embryonic stage, and then there's the suckling stage, and then there's the adolescent stage, and then there's the mature stage of the book, where the book is actually living and speaking to people and articulating its language. And this is something that takes time. And there's two concepts in Jewish mysticism called chachma and bina. And the chachma is you have the spark of the idea. The bina is that you're able to take that spark and now you put circuitry to it. And then finally you bring it to a place of das, which is you're actually making it into this piece of knowledge that is transmittable to people, to self and to others. So it's kind of that through the lens of Jewish mysticism, is this chachma, bina, and das experience in writing. At least that's what I find.
Pretty powerful concepts, right? Because if you've got those things, as part of your upbringing, then you're probably looking for ideas and how to turn them into reality over time, right?
Exactly.
So I haven't heard it expressed in such a sort of formal way, I guess, right? People might stumble across the ideas, but if you've got that framework, to me, the framework is critical. I felt like I had the content for probably 6 years ago, but I didn't have the process to complete it, and it was the equivalent of, like you say, giving birth, and not an easy process, right? Because
right.
You put it away, you think, well, it's a silly idea, and then you think, well, no one's going to read it, no one's going to care. But just for your own benefit, I think, even if no one ever reads it, that the process of completing is powerful.
It's such a catharsis. And I find, at least I can only speak for myself, that these two books, I'm writing above myself. I wrote above myself. I'm writing to an ideal. So it's almost like I'm not only speaking externally, but I'm also communicating internally. So I'm talking to myself, that I got a lot of work to do on myself. I need to be humble and make myself into a vessel so that this information can become reality. So it's not just written like I've reached these levels, or these, as they say in Hebrew, these madregos, these tiers. I'm not there yet either. So I'm writing also to myself to continue to strive, grow, and it is a cathartic experience. 100%.
That resonates with me as well, because I at the bottom of my book, I write that it's version 0.0, which means it's just the foundation. I'm more interested in what happens next, which is kind of like the lean startup approach. It's like, that's my minimum viable product. I'm more interested in what happens when people read it and they say, hey, this reminds me of X, have you heard of Y, blah, blah, blah. And, it's an invitation for people to come out and start collaborating. So I'm more looking forward to what happens afterwards, which sounds a little bit similar to what you're talking about.
100%. Beautiful. Yep.
Excellent. All right. Shall we jump across to Scott to go deeper into, I think, the entrepreneurship element is going to resonate, I think, with what I just mentioned, but let's hear more.
Yeah, I'd love to share more. Thank you, Peter. So yeah, I alluded to a trip that I took to Guatemala in 2014 to build schools. I did it with a nonprofit called Hug It Forward. It was a really impactful trip for me. So just a little bit about the story there in Guatemala was the organization I was building schools with, they build schools out of plastic bottles stuffed with trash, just like this. So they stuff them with trash until they become solid like a brick. They call those eco bricks. And so they're helping an educational issue in Guatemala as well as an environmental issue there. And excuse my cat, I'm going to set her down. She loves to be on video. So kind of my big takeaway from my experience in Guatemala was two things. One was that the community there that we were building a school for was so welcoming. They were so loving. They embraced us immediately. So as soon as we stepped off the bus, they were giving us hugs. They were waving the American flag, giving us high fives. Felt really good. During my week of volunteering, I got to learn how little the people had. Little clean water, which I know you mentioned earlier, Peter. Very little food. They don't have technology like cell phones that we have. But what they did have was gratitude. They were so grateful for the little that they did have, including the new classroom that we were building for them. And I took that message back home with me, and I became more aware of how much complaining I do in my life, but also all around me, like how negative it seems like the world is, including businesses. So as a customer going into a business, we want to be treated like a human being. We want to be, waved, and we want people to say hello to us and smile. And I wasn't feeling that with a lot of businesses. So that's one of the reasons I decided to write my book, The Grateful Entrepreneur. And so I just want to give an example. What does that mean to be a grateful entrepreneur? Gratitude can come in various forms, personally and professionally. It could be as simple as writing a handwritten thank you note to your customers. But on July 17th, 2018, I experienced two forms of a business being grateful to me that I want to share with you as she wants to come up. So on July 17th of 2018, my other cat, who's no longer around, Nomar, he needed to have a tooth pulled because he had an infected tooth. So I took him to the vet, then went to my favorite coffee shop. I was living in Denver at the time. My favorite coffee shop was Fluid Coffee. And I was talking to the barista, and I said, hey, I'm a little bit down today, a little bit anxious. My cat is having a tooth pulled. And she just simply made my coffee and gave it to me on the house. So just a small expression of a company being grateful, showing me, trying to lift up my spirits, not thinking about, hey, it's a transaction, we're going to lose money off the deal. Create that relationship with me. Yeah. Later on that day, when I went to the vet to pick up my cat Nomar, it was a lot of money, right? So, but what they did besides settling the bill was they handed me this certificate, and it's a certificate of bravery saying Nomar was a big boy getting his tooth pulled. So again, it's just two really small tokens of appreciation made me feel so special, one by the coffee shop and one by the vet. And I felt like, hey, we need more gratitude, not only personally, but in our professional lives. We don't want to go into a coffee shop and not be greeted. We don't want to be put on for 30 minutes and felt like we're a nuisance when we call a company. We want to feel valued. We want to be treated like humans, and we want relationships with the companies that we're doing business with. And when we do have a relationship with a business, on the business side of things, that person's going to do more business with you. So that can be a marketing edge for you, is to just cultivate relationships. So
I mean, and the fact that you are still talking about this now just reinforces the fact that, how rare, I guess, that experience is, and how, powerful it is. And, I hope people listen to this and they go into Fluid Coffee Shop and say, hey, I heard about you on this podcast and blah, blah, blah. That would be amazing.
Yeah, it's true. Like when a business sends out a thank you card, it's so rare, right? That oftentimes the customer might post that thank you card on social media.
I would, 100% I would. Yeah.
Creating a buzz for that company. So it can be used as a marketing tool. So an easy place to start for companies to just start sending out handwritten notes to their customers, to their coworkers, even if it's not a thank you, could be just, I'm thinking of you, or sorry for the loss of your pet, something like that. But my book, Grateful Entrepreneur, contains 40 strategies to using gratitude in your business. So
Brilliant.
that's a little bit about my book.
There's an example that you might want to have a look at. Derek Sivers, I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He founded CD Baby.
Yes.
And there's that example in Anything You Want, where I think in the warehouse they're putting together the CDs to mail out to the customers, and one of them said something like, is there anything we could do to make the service better? And they said, you know what, if you could send me some dried squid, that would be cool. And for some reason, one of their employees in the warehouse had just returned from South Korea and had a packet of dried squid, and he put it in the package and he sent it, and that person went on YouTube and praised the company, just saying how amazing is this group, and that's become part of their, I don't know, legacy, I guess. So funky things like that, I think, are kind of cool.
Yeah,
just triggering lots of ideas.
It's great you mentioned that book, because I kind of modeled. He has 40 tips. I put 40 tips in mine, very short chapters, and you could just read, one.
Amazing.
Yeah.
All right. One little side story about Derek is before he kind of got really famous in Tools of Titans and all that stuff. I had written to him as well, because Seth Godin had referred to him and published, I think, Anything You Want for him through Domino Publishing Group or something. And I wrote to him at one stage, and we kind of exchanged emails. Like back then, I think he was replying to everything. I think he's doing it again. And our second daughter was about to start guitar, and he's a musician. I said, well, if I'm going to buy her a guitar, should I get steel strings or nylon strings? 10 emails later, he said, you go for steel strings because it creates the calluses faster. And, that's what you want if you want to learn the guitar. And I went, all right, that's cool. But I still remember that because he took the time to engage, right? Anyway, I like the sound of your book. I'm going to check it out for sure. Austen.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. And this is great. This is honestly the first time that I've kind of been in a space, Chris, to talk about my book and be with grateful people again. So thanks. I'm getting fired up inside. So fun way to start the morning over here. But yeah, the 3 questions are around, did I ever think I'd write a book? How I did it? And then any recommendations, right, Peter?
Yeah. And,
awesome.
And about your book as well would be really great.
Okay.
Just to learn more about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've always wanted to write a book. It's been on my bucket list. I thought I would be a little longer in the tooth and a little older. But I was getting my MBA, and there's a professor there named Eric Custer who started the Creator Institute. And it's an institute that gets students together, professionals, anybody who wants to write a book, and helps them do that. So it gives them the framework and the community to walk through at least the initial manuscript writing process, and then can set them up with a hybrid publisher. So my hybrid publisher is New Degree Press, and they let you maintain ownership of the book while also adding support with regards to editing and copywriting and kind of all that goes into it. So they kind of helped me along in that process. And Stephen, the way you were describing writing a book as birth, obviously I've never been through it, but it I thought was just such a good example of really needing to marinate on these ideas and work through them. And I've always thought of it as a very kind of creative, destructive process. I had written I think around 35,000 words for my initial manuscript. And then through the editing process, I cut 4 different chapters right before I was supposed to submit the book. And that kind of hurt, but it also very much helped focus the book. And so a fun, creative, destructive process that happens. And any recommendations for people who are writing a book? I'd say talk to everybody and anybody about your topic, because you learn so much. I know Scott and Chris, we talked before writing the book or during writing process, and it just adds in new ideas and thoughts. Find a community to do it with, because they'll keep you accountable, and find a good copy editor, because they'll help you as well. So those would be my recommendations.
They're great tips. In fact, I was doing the creatives workshop. That's what helped me get through the process, and it was a 100-day streak. That was the format of whatever you're trying to create. If you're a poet, pick up your pen every day and write a poem. If you're a musician, pick up your guitar. For me, pick up my laptop. And, if I did 5 minutes, then that was, I put a dot in a grid that I just did a hand-drawn 10 by 10 grid.
Yeah.
One dot, 5 minutes. 5 minutes often turned into 10 or 20 or whatever. But 100 dots later, I'd finished the first draft. And similar to you, I had a friend, John Wood, who's the founder of Room to Read. I don't know if you're familiar with that NGO, but you should check it out. He creates literacy programs in developing countries. And he wrote a book called Leaving Microsoft to Change the World about 20 years ago. And I think his goal back then was to teach 1 million children to read and to build 1,000 libraries. And right now he's up to, last time I spoke to him was a few months ago, he was up to 37,000 libraries and 20 million children. And yeah, I highly recommend checking out what he's done. He's written a more recent book called Purpose Incorporated. And he ended up writing the foreword to my book. And I got that idea because on the cover of his book, he wrote, Seth Godin had written a quote, and it made me think, who could write a foreword or a quote for my book? I'd met Seth briefly, but there's no way he would do it for just some random dude. He must get asked 100 times a day. But I knew John, and I said, well, maybe he might do it, and he said yes. And one of the, I guess, difficult things was he said, look, I've read your book, and you've got too many examples. You need to get rid of 30%. And that to me was tough because, like you said, the destructive process, that's like saying, well, hang on, this is your family photo album. You need to get rid of 30% of the photos. Not straightforward. But the way I reconciled it was, okay, I can repurpose that content into another book or articles or whatever you want, So all this back catalog is there ready for something else. Yeah,
it definitely is. And but it's fun. It makes you focus, which I think is the fun part of getting down to what you're really trying to say. And I guess just leaving
people wanting more, I guess, was his message. You don't want to overwhelm people, but give them a taste, let them use their imagination, and then they'll go and dig deeper, or they'll reach out and connect and say, hey, tell me more about this or that, right? And then Chris, well, sorry.
Oh, I didn't know. I can talk a little more about the book too, or I can jump in later.
Sorry, let's do that.
Yeah, and so my gratitude journey, writing a thank you note a day, it really came out of, I think, testing other iterations of gratitude that I didn't know I was testing. For example, I had tried to do a gratitude journal every evening, and for some reason it just never stuck with me. And so what I found throughout this process of writing daily is a framework for making it more accessible to myself, and then observing other gratitude journeymen and women and how they did it. And so I came up with a 5 framework approach, or a 5 faves approach to doing it. And it was really kind of about embedding gratitude into your existing rituals. And so every morning I wake up, I have coffee, I think, I read, like that's my me time. And I just basically took that gratitude writing and put it right into that little ritual. And it made it much more consistent. And so won't dive too much into it, but the framework is, step 1, really setting the mindset and declaring why you're doing a gratitude project and setting the expectations for yourself. 2 is tying it to your talents. So designing that project so it's something you already love doing. So maybe it could be, if you like music or your daughter likes music, you can play music of gratitude every day or write a song of gratitude every day. Step 3 is really identifying the stakeholders you want to give gratitude to. So there's a little framework for how you can think about different people in your life and giving gratitude. Step 4 is really simplifying deployment and preparing for it. So for me, it was having a ton of thank you notes and stamps ready to go, so I didn't have to purchase any of those every day. And then lastly is just to reflect and celebrate. And for me, that was the writing process. But that's the framework I learned. And a lot of that came from talking with people like Chris and Scott about their projects as well. Great.
I love it. And then Chris, I know you dumped a lot of writing on your editor, and I'm sure you got a lot to say about how she's contributed as well. You're on mute.
Thank you. Yeah, a little switchboard guy here to unmute himself. It's so great to have all y'all here. I'll try to be short and sweet about about my stuff here. The book I'm sharing with today is Dear 2020: Letters to a Year That Changed Everything, and I'm just going to briefly let the introduction speak for itself. So, this book came out of necessity, and the necessity of letting others spray some water on the fires that have been set during 2020. The seed of this idea for the book was planted inside me last year while my editor and I were discussing categories and ideas and emotions we wanted people to write in gratitude for the book Dear 2020, an anthology. And again, a short time later, as I read the essays and letters submitted by the contributors, so many of them were about COVID-19 and how it affected their lives. And the idea re-entered my mind thanks to two friends. First, my friend Kevin Monroe shared something on LinkedIn that led me to Emma Lloyd and her open letter to 2020. And in this letter, she finds gratitude within losing her dad and sharing a glass of wine at a distance with her mom. And these two sentences really, really got me. She said this. She said, during a lockdown walk, I remember saying the trees are greener this year. They weren't greener. I just hadn't noticed them before in the busyness of everyday life. It's Emma Lloyd. And the second one, my friend who's on here, Peter, he shared in an article written by Elliot Dolan, a young author who passed away from cancer this year. Dolan's article titled "Terminal Cancer Means I Won't See the Other Side of Lockdown" really struck a nerve. His other article, "At 31, I have just weeks to live. Here's what I want to pass on," was posted on September 7th, the day he passed away. And in it, he writes, "First, the importance of gratitude. During my worst moments, the shock of cancer diagnosis, the mental lows and debilitating symptoms of chemotherapy, it was difficult to picture any future moments of joy, closeness, or love. Even so, at those times, I found comfort in remembering what I have: an amazing family, the friends I've made, and times I've shared with them, the privilege of the life I've had." Elliot Dolan. These are the ideas behind the book, but all this work really started following one event, the death of my mother, exactly 4 months after I posted a message on her Facebook page. Now I just want to give this book its, I released this book on the 7th anniversary of my mom's passing as a way to, to send me on this. This is my journey of gratitude. And this book is a book about perspective and why it all matters. You can basically, any year, any day has all colors of the spectrum, all colors of the rainbow. And we, at the end of the day, or the year, we get to decide what we want to focus on. What do you want to walk away with? And I just wanted to give people an opportunity to share their years, because I know that the mirror reflection allows light to go into places that darkness is. It allows us to see things we wouldn't see just because we would never think to see them, right? Reading another contributor, that Peter's friend Diana, she lost both of her parents. I remember reading that letter when it came in, and I remember crying. I was laying in bed and literally shaking because I was so moved by it. And I'll tell you, when you read something like that, I can honestly say, I'm so grateful my father's here. I could say that. I mean that, and I'm sure we all feel that way if we love our parents. But when you read about things and moments like that, it reminds you, it brings you more closer to the heart of that idea. And that's what Dear 2020 is. And I will be, ideally, we were talking earlier, there will be a Dear 2021, just because I want people, I think any year, again, this is not a COVID book. This is a retrospective a year. This is perspective. One of the biggest keys to gratitude is perspective. And I love being able to hear people's perspective and to share people's perspective, because it's a gateway to gratitude.
I think one of the things that people, you eventually realize is that writing rewires your brain. Like the more you can articulate ideas and find the words, it changes, you physically, mentally, everything. And what I love about the format for your books is that it gives people an entry point into maybe writing their own book, complete book one day, So my eldest daughter contributed to Dear Gratitude, and then, a bunch of other friends, and then even more for Dear 2020. And it's planted a seed and say, hey, look, here's a book that I've been published in, which is a gift for sure, that is now part of their legacy that, their children and grandchildren will see. So I find that really helpful. I don't know if you realize how important that is. Even the fact that you're helping to co-host podcasts and providing training wheels for a bunch of different people now, I think is really powerful too, because I don't think I would have been doing podcasts if it wasn't for the fact that you stepped up and said, yeah, let's collaborate. And then through WhatsApp, it's like we're iterating in real time. And I'm sure it's the same with all of you guys. If I know Chris, he's reaching out and exploring ways to collaborate on all of the different projects that we've got here. But I want to go back and maybe, for Stephen, for instance, your books sound like they've got some serious substance in there. Like, what are the top few ideas that you'd love to share with everyone here?
I think the books, the thrust of both of the books, both the Infinity Frequency and the latest one, Universal, is really was really about connection, and is really about unity, and is really about recognizing that that and this is a quote, and we're not human beings having a spiritual experience, we're spiritual beings having a human experience. And I think that is that the book tries to catapult that idea into everyday life. And again, it really touches upon a lot of different avenues, but it hones in on spirituality, personal growth, gratitude inventory, and it works a lot with philosophy. And I also weave in there a little bit, I sprinkle it with a little bit of Jewish mysticism for good measure. So, there's a lot going on in there. I bring a lot of quotes from various sources, rabbis, great thinkers, scientists, teachers. So I try to make it this very colorful tapestry of ideas, but really the core, the nucleus is really about personal growth, spirituality, positivity, and gratitude. And each article tries to convey that in its own special way through its own lenses, and that's really where it's at, because in a dark world we can each be a light. And my father-in-law, Alav Shalom, may he rest in peace, Rav Gabriel Finkel, he used to say, he shared that each of us is like a candle, and this really struck me. In what way are we like a candle? The original candle that's lit, once it shares its light with another candle, the original candle is never diminished when it shares its light with a new candle that has not yet been lit. On the contrary, you're increasing light. So the original candle shares its light. It doesn't diminish the original light. It increases more light, and each of us kind of ignite each other, and we're not diminishing our own light, but on the contrary, we're bringing more light. And this is kind of what I see Chris and Peter and all of us together here. We're sharing our lights, if you will, and we're not diminishing our light in that process. But again, on the contrary, we're bringing more illumination to the world. So we're sharing our lights. And if we continue to do this and continue to ignite each other, if you will, through the candle process, we realize that really we are just spreading our lights. And this is really how we illuminate the world.
Very powerful.
And that's really touched upon in both books.
And you kind of remind me again of the go-giver, right, approach, like helping others without expecting anything in return, and how, it's similar sort of mindset, right?
Correct.
Trust the process and wait for the magic to happen, because it does continuously.
Right. This is an altruistic process. I'm not a scholar. I'm not a rabbi. I'm not here to put on any pretenses of the like. I'm just a simple person trying to spread light, positivity, and gratitude, and connect with other people, and just ignite that circuit board and bring more beauty, positivity, health, and just all around sense of well-being to the world in the universe.
Excellent. And you've children. How old are your children?
I have three children, 14, 12, and 7.
Fantastic. And You've traveled around the world, or?
Yeah, I've done some traveling. I mean, when I was in the punk and metal bands, I toured the States. I think I can't remember exactly, 38, 42. I can't recall the precise number. I've been overseas. I actually lived in Israel when I started that spiritual journey about 20 years ago. I was there for about 8 months, and that was beautifully intense. Now I'm a practicing psychotherapist at a psychiatric inpatient hospital, and have my own small private practice on the side. That's my
And
career.
what instrument did you play? You were in these bands, or?
Yes, I was actually. It depends on how you define vocals and singing. I was the lead screamer, shrieker, growler, chanter, disenchanter. So it depends.
And you're on Spotify somewhere?
I think YouTube. I think what is it? Bandcamp. The stuff's out there.
We might have to share some of these links later on, Chris.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's abrasive. It's very heavy. Its content there's darkness and there's light in it, but it's gritty.
It's all gritty. Good. We all need to get through our teenage years somehow, right?
Right, and this went on into my 20s. I think I ended up calling that my extended adolescence.
Yeah,
it was an extended adolescence, and but I'm so grateful to have been able to experience all that. And there's a great saying from the Zohar, which is another Kabbalistic text. It says, "Through the darkness of ordeals, the light of personal growth is revealed." Mm-hmm. And that's one of those again nuggets of wisdom that I try to continuously inculcate into my own life and share with other people, is that through the darkness of ordeals, the light of personal growth is revealed. And if we can use each thing that we go through, struggle, strife, it's really, if we use it as stepping stones rather than stumbling blocks, we can actually begin to grow internally and then externally. And we become more expansive rather than contractive. We expand rather than contract. And that's where we make more room for what Chris is talking about. Creating space is not a contraction. It's an expansion, right? Because if we're trying to make room and create space for others and self too to grow, we must not only be compassionate to others, but that compassion must encircle ourselves. And so that's through the darkness of ordeals, the light of personal growth is revealed.
So that quote alone reminds me, my first book, Chris knows, I wrote an original book about 6 years ago, and more of it's a compilation. Not a fun situation, but I'll just describe it briefly, where my youngest sister-in-law went missing when she was 18 in Australia, and she's never been seen since. And that's about 19 years ago, and no closure. But along the way, as part of compiling her artwork, her poetry, her stories, I discovered, some of her friends that were looking for an opportunity to write about that and to contribute to something like this. And just one case study that came out of that was one of her friends who'd gone on to become a musician and form a band, release some CDs. She eventually said, "Oh, by the way, I've got my father was born in Macau, which is near Hong Kong. I've got relatives all around there. I've never been there." So I created kind of a personal project to try and get her to perform at a music festival here called Clockenflat, which is kind of like Lollapalooza, Coachella type thing. And 6 months later, it happened. She came and stayed with us. She performed on stage. I went, something bad happened, but something small in a positive direction also happened. And then now we try to support her career. She performed at South by Southwest, and she was in New York when she released a second CD. And all these good things keep on sort of happening. If you add it up, from publishing that first book, there's about 15 or more positive things that happened just because we took the time to document how creative the missing sister-in-law was. So anyway, lots of good logic in what you're talking about. Thanks. Scott, of your 40 things that you were talking about, what are your top 3, your inventory or your process?
Yeah, my top 3. Simple one that I mentioned earlier is handwritten notes. I know Austen talked a lot about that. And again, it could be for a multitude of things, sympathy, handwritten note. One of the tips I like in my book is sending handwritten notes on weird holidays. So like, you know, if a business does send a handwritten note on a holiday, it's usually for you know, in December, for Christmas. What about for 4th of July, for Groundhog's Day, when a customer is not expecting to get a card then. So that's neat. I like the power of video. So instead of maybe wishing a customer or a coworker happy birthday on a Facebook timeline, which is just going to get lost amongst the 1,000 other happy birthdays, what about sending a personal video through Messenger or through you know, your text platform? That really can help you stand out. I've even sent out thank you videos. So when somebody orders a product, I'll create a personalized video to say thank you for just ordering that. And I do want to bring up as maybe a third tip is to don't discount appreciating your team, right? You know, your team needs to feel valued. And I've seen actually, I've read about companies that do such a good job of expressing gratitude and thanks to their customers, and then maybe you go on Glassdoor and you read reviews on what it's like to work for that company, and they haven't really taken care of their team. And so I learned from one of my, I guess you would call him a mentor, Dr. Paul White, who co-wrote the 5 Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace, that it's so important to value your team so that they can do their best work and so that you can retain them and they're going to stay with your company for a long time. And so we each, if we're a part of a team, we each have a way that we like to receive appreciation at work. So the idea is to find out what language we like to receive appreciation, and then hopefully your company will appreciate you in that language. So that's another thing I touch on in my book as well.
Yeah, really helpful. Austen, what about you? What are the few, you know, I guess key insights that you want to share?
Oh man, Peter, such a good question. I think I shared a bit about the framework already, so I'll just share 2 stories that I think kind of exemplify a lot of the things we've been talking about. And you know, taking the time to do gratitude consistently puts you in a mindset to be open to all these opportunities for gratitude that you wouldn't expect. For me, that happened at the beginning of COVID. In my old apartment, we sat on the first floor and looked out into an alley. And we moved in the summer, and about every Wednesday, the trash collectors would come in, and one trash collector would get out, and he would just stand right in the center of my window and help kind of motion the truck to back in. And he would always turn, and we would look at each other and, hey, what's going on? And after a while, when I was writing the thank you notes, I'm like, you know what? I'm alone in here all day doing school and work, and that human interaction means so much to me. And so the next day I went outside and gave him a note and his partner a note. And there wasn't a ton of interaction, but I noticed that wave was much warmer, and every time they left, they gave a little honk too. And so these interactions, whether it's, you know, your family member who you have hit a lot of shared history or somebody who you don't, gratitude, there's an opportunity for gratitude there. So I love everything we've been talking about, and putting ourselves in that mindset to be open to it no matter what.
I'm going to remember that story that you just described, just because it's so, you know, that's one of my discoveries is how powerful stories are, right? That's what you remember, not the facts, not the figures, not the, you know, top-down statistics sort of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, so many things. And how I got access to that was through a book a professor of entrepreneurship had written, a guy called Craig Wortman. He wrote a book called What Is Your Story? And in the introduction, I bought it on the way to work. I read the introduction. I haven't actually read beyond the introduction because I think I got the core ideas, and they've stuck with me. 3 sentences. Stories are your most valuable asset. They're more important than facts. And if you don't write them down, they did not happen. And, you know, that first one jumped out because, or the last one actually in particular, you know, if you don't write them down, they didn't happen. My father's from a big family. 5 of his brothers went to World War II. Somehow, despite being shot down, POW, everything else, presumed dead, they all survived. And but only 2 of them bothered to write their story, and not to be published, but just for their children, grandchildren. And they gave, a hard copy to my parents, and they, I've made sure I scanned them so they weren't lost. My children know there's 5 people in uniform. Their children will know there were 2 that bothered to write the story. And so, that was really important. Same thing, stories are more important than facts. And going back to Scott's example, going and building, schools in developing countries. We support a school in Tanzania that the whole theme is fighting poverty through education. And if you think about, they might say, look, there's 10 million children in Africa that don't get access to quality education or drinking water. We're going to solve this problem. How much would you like to contribute? And you add up those donations and you average them $2.20. But if you take the alternative approach, which is let's focus on one individual rather than 10 million, which no one can really, conceive, and you say, look, here's a typical day in the life of Scott. He gets up at 4 a.m. He's got to walk 10 kilometers to school, come back, milk cows, help his family. Here he is doing his homework by, in the dirt by candlelight. How much would you like to contribute to make sure he finishes school?
Yeah.
$7.70, $10.50. It's always 3 times, 5 times more important. So the cool thing about it is he's collected data to prove that stories are more important than facts, which I think is a skill in itself. And then, most valuable asset, I think it's probably true, right? Maybe our books will become our most valuable asset if we can sell enough of them. But let's see. Even if they don't, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
All right. We're back to Chris. The biggest messages, I guess, or insights from your books that you've kind of, I guess, learned?
Well, I know we're coming on the time, guys, so I appreciate you giving us an hour here. We're going to go another 5 or 10 minutes if you have to go. I totally understand. I wanted to just share a couple things. Then I wanted to pique Peter's interest about how we know each other, because again, I call them like these gratitude building blocks to the moment. They're the building blocks that allow the moment to happen. But as far as the takeaways from my book or from Dear 2020, it's I just want to create the space for people to share what they're grateful for and come to that moment. And a book where you initiate people to share does exactly what I want to happen in the world. Mm-hmm. So the beautiful thing is, if you've got a voice or you've got a computer, you can put a call out, right? You could say, who wants to write, like Peter was saying, and if you have friends like Peter, they'll echo that to other people and bring more people into your life that you've never met, that you grab the opportunity for people to share. It's almost like the flip side of if you write a gratitude letter, you're basically opening a space up for somebody else to write a gratitude letter because they are around the same thing. But, I like doing compilation books and I will continue to do them. I am going to do my own books, but I love the compilation because, again, you might, for example, with Dear Gratitude, like you might not resonate with my story, right? Which is fine. It's not like everyone's, you can't be everyone's cup of tea. You know what I mean? Like we can't. And why would we want to be? Because it's not possible. But the great thing about having, 50, 60 stories of people sharing gratitude is one of those is someone's cup of tea. So the great thing about having a group, a group's message, which they're sharing a message of gratitude, but it's a group because it's different people, is there are stories that will resonate, so it's a beautiful project that I'll continue to do. So to tether off here at the end, though, I like, again, these grateful gratitude, these building blocks of gratitude that assess the moment. So real quickly, I just wanted to say, the amazing thing about books, so this book comes out, and this is me tying into how I know Stephen really fast. This book comes out, and somebody I co-work with, she decides she's going to send this book to her daughter that lives in Georgia, and she's going to get an ebook and read some of it with her daughter. And because she sent the book to her daughter, Lindsay, the book created the space for Lindsay to think, oh, how could I somehow add gratitude into the hospital I work at? So long story short, that collaboration came in, I didn't even think about this. That allowed this book to exist because this is this was built for people that are going through trauma or doing rehab in hospitals. But what I'm getting at is, Stephen works in that hospital, and because now Lindsay's in my life and I'm having conversations about gratitude, I meet Stephen, and therefore, I have his book. We're having conversations now, and I have a kindred spirit that totally gets gratitude. I'm hoping that we're going to have many more conversations and friendships. So literally this book manifested Stephen into my life, which I think is beautiful. And then on the flip side, speaking to how I met Austen, how did we meet? Because I'm in the gratitude space in the realm, Georgia and Benton, who has the gratitude podcast, I believe, and Austen could correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Austen heard me on Georgian's podcast, and because he became friends in his process of writing his book with Georgian, Austen reached out to me and we had a conversation. And then if I'm correct, I feel like I am, if I'm remembering correctly, Austen was being very generous because he loves to connect people, which is something that I think we all have in common. And one of the people, I believe, he said, you need to meet Scott Colby. Is that right, Austen?
Yeah, that's right. And I think it was our relationship too happened from Darren Hollingsworth, who actually introduced us, I think. Is that right? Georgian and Darren?
I think you just reached out to me straight because you found me. I haven't physically ever talked to Darren.
Oh, well then there you go. It was Georgian.
Austen, I think Darren introduced me and you.
That sounds right. And then I introduced you and Chris. It gets a little hazy in the gratitude space. A lot of good people making introductions to good people. So I think you had it right, Chris.
Okay. Well, either way, it's just again, grateful people introducing to people. We're all sitting in this space. I think it feels like we're all putting our artwork on the wall, and we're finding our tribe or the people that resonate with it, and those people obviously help it resonate going further. And this right here is specifically another piece of artwork that we're collaborating together to share our thoughts and our passion and our gratitude.
So one of the things that sort of resonated, you mentioned, I think, Austen, around, how do you make gratitude stick a little bit more? And so just in the last week or so, I was approached by two people to write a review. So one was our friend Gail, Chris, who's just about to publish her second book, and she wanted a comment for that. And I sent it to her, and then I thought, I could repurpose that exact same quote by posting it direct to LinkedIn as a recommendation. And I noticed that she had never received a recommendation there before because she's not really active on LinkedIn. That's not really her space. But I think that an unexpected recommendation coming up through there is pretty powerful. And the same thing, I had Lindsay Varty, who will definitely get on this program one day. I'd forgotten because she's done this beautiful book called Sunset Survivors around sort of the last generation of people that are doing certain businesses in Hong Kong. And she goes and captures them and interviews them. She just recently interviewed a motorbike mechanic in Kennedy Town and spends time with him, did this beautiful interview. And I wrote a review for her website. And then same thing, I published it to LinkedIn. I think if we could get into the habit of doing that once a week, just pick someone random and that we know and write a few sentences. And, maybe you do it by each Sunday evening or each Monday morning or whatever it is. I have a feeling that that's going to build momentum and turn into something useful. So maybe we can challenge ourselves to hold ourselves accountable to do that. Maybe for a month, and then maybe for a quarter, then maybe for a year, and then maybe in perpetuity. Could be a cool little tradition that we start here.
Love it, man. This has been great, guys. Thank you so much. I've loved our little powwow here, and I'm glad we're all connected now. And, like our friend Daniel in our last podcast, it's like, I don't know what that means or it means anything else is going to happen. But the cool thing is it's possible now, right?
Mm-hmm. Planting seeds. It's all about planting.
Right.
In fact, that's what productive excellence is. The fact that we're bothering to have this conversation. So the full version of productive excellence is put yourself at risk of productive excellence, which means say yes to go on some random podcast and stay open-minded and see if any magic emerges. And I think it happens more often than not, the fact that we're here. Imagine if we had said, no, it doesn't seem relevant, or it's got nothing to do with my day job or whatever. How much how much I think are we missing out on if we don't take these opportunities, because there's more. It's almost unlimited opportunities when you find like-minded people. That's why I really appreciated some of the Seth Godin workshops. It's why I signed up for them, because I knew I was going to meet similar types of people. And we still got weekly calls going on with that workshop that we did last year, that we've just voluntarily continued. Every Friday night we have a Zoom call, and now Chris is connected to Gail, and you've got your own side projects, I think, with her, which is amazing. So anyway, to be continued, I'm sure.
Well, it's been wonderful, guys. We'll really appreciate the time. I want you all to have a wonderful day. And I'm Chris with Peter and Steven and Scott and Austen. Just reminding you guys have a lot to be grateful for, and just get out there and put yourself in a place to meet new people and have new experiences. And that'll set you in place in the moment, and the moments where you want to be, because that's where all the magic happens. So thank you all very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you,
Chris. Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
All the best.